She texted her mom in tears, but Millionaire got her message and fell in love with her. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is a roller coaster of emotions. Imagine this. A woman, heartbroken and in tears, sends a message to her mom. But someone else ends up reading it. And that someone? A millionaire, a successful CEO, someone with the power to change her life. But that's not all. This is where the story takes an unexpected twist. Curious yet? Well, you're in for a surprise, so stick around until the end. Before we jump into this incredible story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Stories TH for more amazing stories like this one. Oh, and drop your location and time zone in the comments below. I love seeing where all of you are tuning in from. Now, relax, get comfortable, and let's dive into this heartwarming and unexpected tale. She cried in the darkness. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world seemed to slow down and everything around her felt distant. She sat by the window, the faint glow of the city lights filtering in, casting long shadows across the room. Her phone was clutched tightly in her hand, the screen reflecting her tear-streaked face. The weight of everything crashing down on her had become too much to bear, and now she was at her lowest point. She had been holding it together for so long, but tonight the floodgates opened. She could hear her own breath, shallow and ragged, as she typed out the message to her mother. She wanted to sound strong, but the words just kept slipping out through the cracks in her heart. Her fingers trembled as she typed, pausing every few seconds, unsure if she could even finish the message. But she knew she had to. She needed someone to know what she was feeling, to hear her pain, even if it was just through a text. "Mom, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Everything's falling apart. I don't know what to do anymore. Please help me. I'm so lost." Her thumb hovered over the send button, the words hanging there, almost too real to confront. She closed her eyes, feeling the tears begin to fall again, but this time, they were different. They were the kind of tears that came from a place of complete surrender. She wasn't just sad anymore. She was empty. The weight of her dreams and her failures, her hopes and her regrets, they all collided in a single moment of despair. But as she finally pressed send, something unexpected happened. The message didn't go to her mother. Instead, it was sent to a number she didn't recognize. A strange coincidence, or perhaps fate, had guided the message to the wrong person. She had no idea that this small mistake would change everything. Across town, in the penthouse suite of a luxury building, a man sat at his desk, the city sprawling out beneath him like a glittering ocean of lights. His world was different from hers in every way. He had everything: wealth, power, status, but there was something missing, a piece of him that couldn't be filled with money or success. And as he looked down at his phone, the vibration interrupted his thoughts. It was an unfamiliar number. He hesitated for a moment before opening the message. The words on the screen hit him in a way he wasn't prepared for. They were raw, unfiltered, and filled with a kind of pain he hadn't expected to find. As he read, his mind raced. Who was this? Why was she reaching out? But more than anything, he felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Compassion. He knew he should probably ignore the message. It was clearly a mistake. But something about her words lingered in his mind. There was a vulnerability in them, a sincerity that seemed to echo something deep within him. So, against his better judgment, he typed a reply. "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number. But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." He hit send, almost instantly regretting it. What had he just done? Why had he opened himself up to a stranger's pain? But it was too late now. He had already sent the message, and for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to take it back. Back in her apartment, the woman stared at her phone, confused. Who was this? She wasn't sure what she had expected, maybe a response from her mom, or no response at all, but this stranger's message threw her off. She felt a strange sudden connection to the words he had written. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Something in his tone felt different from the cold indifference of people she had known her whole life. It was almost as if he cared, but she didn't respond right away. She wasn't sure why, but something about the situation felt off. She had no idea who this person was, and the last thing she wanted was to start some random conversation with a stranger. But at the same time, there was a curiosity that tugged at her, something she couldn't quite shake. It was strange, but in a way, it made the conversation feel more personal. They weren't talking about money or status. They were just two people connecting over shared struggles and aspirations. As the day wore on, she found herself looking forward to their conversations. She had always been a private person, but with him, it felt like she could say anything. There was a strange sense of trust that had formed between them, even though they were still strangers. She couldn't help but wonder about him. Who was he really? What was his life like? Why had he reached out to her, a woman he didn't know? The questions lingered in her mind, but for now, she was content to just talk. She didn't need to know everything. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone cared. And that was enough for her. As she set her phone down for the night, she realized something she hadn't thought about in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had believed. Two worlds collide. The next few days unfolded in a way she had never expected. What started as a random message from a stranger had turned into a source of solace she hadn't realized she needed. They continued to talk, their conversations moving from late-night exchanges to messages scattered throughout the day. Each one brought a sense of calm that she couldn't find anywhere else. For the first time in what felt like years, she began to feel heard, not just by him, but by herself. She found herself looking forward to each text, finding comfort in his words. They spoke about dreams, about fears, about the weight of expectations that seemed to crush her every day. And with each passing conversation, she found herself opening up more, revealing parts of herself she had kept hidden for so long. But something had started to change. There were moments when she would glance at his replies and wonder, who was this man? Why did he care? She never asked too many questions, at least, not at first. He never seemed to offer anything about his personal life, almost as if he preferred to remain a mystery. She didn't mind that. There was something refreshing about the anonymity of it all. She could be herself, without any judgment or expectations. But curiosity was starting to nibble at her, and she couldn't help but wonder what kind of person he really was. Then, one evening, just as she was about to shut her phone down for the night, he sent something unexpected. "Are you free tomorrow night? I know this may seem odd, but I'd like to meet you in person." Her heart skipped a beat. A mix of excitement and anxiety surged through her. This was the moment she had been both anticipating and dreading. Up until now, everything had been easy safe. But meeting in person, facing the unknown, was a whole new level of vulnerability. For a moment, she hesitated. Could she really meet this stranger? Was it wise? She barely knew anything about him yet. Something told her that this was different. Something told her that this was real. "I don't know," she typed back. "I'm not sure it's a good idea." There was a brief pause before his reply came in. "I understand your hesitation. I'm not asking for anything more than a simple meeting. You've been talking to a stranger, and I get that. But maybe it's time to see if there's a real connection here." His words were calm, understanding, and thoughtful. She couldn't help but feel that they weren't just words. He truly seemed to care. "Okay," she typed after a long moment, her hands trembling slightly. "Where and when?" He replied quickly with a location and time, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't too far from where she lived, but it was far enough to give them both space to ease into the meeting without drawing too much attention. The following evening, she dressed carefully, but not too carefully. She didn't want to seem like she was trying too hard. It wasn't a date. It was just two people who had shared parts of themselves with each other. She kept telling herself that, even as her stomach fluttered with nerves. She had never been this anxious about meeting someone, especially someone she barely knew. But there was something about him that made her want to see him face to face, to understand the man behind the words. When she arrived at the cafe, she sat at a table near the window, the soft light from the street lamp casting a warm glow around the room. Her heart beat faster as she scanned the faces of the few people inside, wondering if she would recognize him. She didn't even know what he looked like. All she had were the messages. But she had never felt more connected to someone in her life, and that strange feeling gave her the courage to wait. A few minutes passed before the door opened. She looked up, her breath catching in her throat as a man walked in. He was tall, dressed casually, yet with an air of refinement that was impossible to ignore. His presence filled the room without him even trying. But it wasn't just his appearance that caught her attention, it was the look in his eyes. When their gazes met across the room, everything else seemed to fade into the background. He walked over to her, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence hung in the air, charged with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. "Hi," he said, his voice deeper than she had imagined, yet still warm. "Hi," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He sat down across from her, and they both looked at each other for a long moment. The tension in the air was palpable, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of tension that comes before something important, something real. "I'm glad you agreed to meet," he said, breaking the silence. "I know it's a big step, and I appreciate your trust." She nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I wasn't sure, but I felt like I had to know more." They smiled at each other, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like everything might just be okay. This stranger, the one she had confided in over text, was now sitting in front of her, someone who had listened when no one else did, someone who had understood her pain without judgment. But as they continued talking, she couldn't ignore the growing realization that their worlds were completely different. He was a man who had everything: wealth, power, a life most people could only dream of. And here she was, sitting across from him, a woman who felt like she was drowning in her own struggles. She had always known that people like him lived in a world she could never enter, but now, sitting face to face with him, the gap between their lives seemed even wider. Still, she couldn't help but feel that what they shared was real. And for the first time, she wasn't so sure that the divide between them mattered. The truth beneath the surface. As the evening wore on, the conversation between them flowed more naturally. At first, there had been a certain stiffness between them, a kind of hesitation that made each word feel measured. But now, as they sat there in the soft glow of the cafe, the walls between them seemed to melt away. It wasn't just the coffee or the dim lighting that made everything feel warmer. It was the connection they had slowly built over the past few days. She found herself laughing at something he said, and he smiled in return, a genuine, unguarded smile that made her forget the differences between them, if only for a moment. He wasn't just a millionaire CEO, a man who seemed so far removed from her world. In that moment, he was just a man who was trying to understand her pain, just like everyone else. He wasn't treating her like an obstacle to overcome, nor was he patronizing her. It felt like a level playing field, something she had never imagined would exist between them. "So, tell me," he said, his voice quiet but intent. "What is it you really want? Not what you think you should want, but what your heart truly desires." Her breath caught in her throat. That question, simple, yet profound, touched a nerve. She had never allowed herself to think about her desires in such a way. She had spent so much of her life trying to survive, to make ends meet, that she hadn't stopped to dream in a long time. What did she want? She had never truly asked herself that question. She shifted in her seat, suddenly feeling vulnerable, unsure how to answer. "I don't know. I guess I've just been trying to get by, trying to make a life for myself. I've never really thought about what I want deep down." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze soft yet intense. Sometimes getting by isn't enough. Life is more than just surviving. It's about living. You deserve to live, not just exist. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had always been taught to work hard, to fight for what she had, but no one had ever told her she deserved to live a life beyond struggle. She had always accepted the idea that she would always be a small part of a world that didn't care, that would always be at the bottom of the ladder, fighting to climb higher. But here he was, sitting in front of her, telling her she deserved more. It was a concept so foreign to her, yet it resonated deeply within her soul. "I don't know how to get there," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like I'm stuck in a cycle. I dream of something more, but I don't know how to make it happen." He nodded thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's not easy, but nothing worth having ever is. You can't let fear or doubt hold you back. You have to take chances, make decisions that feel right for you even if they're scary." Her heart raced as she listened to him speak. This man, a stranger just days ago, was now sharing wisdom with her, challenging her to break free from the life she had settled for. She wasn't used to being told she could have something better. For the longest time, she had believed that her circumstances defined her. But here he was, asking her to believe in something bigger than what she could see right in front of her. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for that," she said, the doubt creeping back in. "What if I fail?" He gave her a small smile, one that made her feel like he understood exactly what she was going through. Failure isn't the end. It's part of the journey. The only real failure is not trying at all. And from what I've learned, sometimes the biggest success comes from taking risks. For a long time, she had thought success was about working hard, keeping her head down, and simply making it through each day. She had never really allowed herself to imagine what success could look like beyond survival. But sitting here with him, listening to his words, something began to shift inside her. Maybe success wasn't just about managing the struggle. Maybe it was about embracing the possibility of something more. She looked at him, wondering what had driven him to this point, to become the person he was, someone who had so much yet seemed to be offering her more than just advice. There was something in his eyes, a depth she couldn't quite place. He wasn't just a man with wealth and power. There was a quiet sadness in him, too, something that made her wonder if they shared more in common than just their pain. She wanted to ask him about it, to know more about his life, but she wasn't sure how. They had barely scratched the surface of their conversation, and yet she already felt like they had crossed a line, one that went beyond the ordinary, beyond the small talk that usually defined these kinds of meetings. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment of silence. "Of course." She hesitated, unsure if it was too soon to ask, but the question had been haunting her since the moment they sat down. "Why did you reach out to me? You didn't know who I was. You had no reason to. Why me?" He seemed to consider the question for a long time, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost as if he were talking to himself as much as to her. "I don't know," he said slowly. "I guess I've been looking for something, too. I don't know what it is, but when I read your message, I felt like I wasn't the only one who had been searching for more. Maybe that's why." There was something in his words, in the way he said it, that made her believe him. It wasn't just some random act of kindness. It was deeper than that. They were both looking for something that had been missing from their lives for too long. And as they sat there talking about their lives, their struggles, and their hopes, she realized that maybe, just maybe, they were both exactly what the other needed. Two people from different worlds, yet strangely connected by a shared desire to live, not just survive. Breaking down walls. The weeks that followed their first meeting unfolded in ways she hadn't expected. What had started as a series of late-night text messages had blossomed into something far deeper. They spoke every day, sometimes for hours, sharing everything from the mundane details of their day to the deeper, more vulnerable parts of themselves they had never shown to anyone. Each conversation felt like a thread weaving them closer together, and with each passing day, the distance between their worlds seemed to shrink a little more. She found herself thinking about him all the time. He was never far from her mind. But even as the connection between them deepened, there was always a nagging thought in the back of her mind. He was a millionaire, a powerful man, with a life she couldn't even begin to imagine. He lived in a world that was so far removed from hers, a world of wealth and influence that seemed beyond her reach. How could someone like him ever truly understand someone like her? And yet, there was something about him that made her believe he did understand. When he spoke about his own struggles, his own loneliness, she could hear the sincerity in his voice. He wasn't just a man with a facade of success. He was someone who had experienced his own pain, his own battles. The more they talked, the more she realized that they weren't so different after all. One evening, as she sat on the couch in her small apartment, scrolling through her phone, she saw a message from him. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately," the message read. "There's something about our conversations that makes me feel alive again. Like I'm not just going through the motions of life, but actually living it." Her heart skipped a beat. She had always known that their connection was something special, but to hear him say it, to know that he felt the same way, made her heart swell with warmth. For the first time in ages, she felt like someone truly saw her like she mattered. She quickly typed a response. "I feel the same way. It's strange. I didn't think I'd ever connect with someone like you, but here we are. And honestly, it feels like I've known you for a lifetime." Her phone buzzed almost immediately with his reply. "Maybe we have. Maybe we've been looking for each other all along." She smiled at his words, a wave of emotion washing over her. They had both been searching for something in their lives, something that had been missing for so long. And maybe they had finally found it in each other. As the days passed, they continued to grow closer. They talked about everything about their hopes and fears, their desires, their pasts. She shared stories of her childhood, of the struggles she had faced growing up, of the dreams she had always held close but never thought would come true. And he listened, truly listened, without judgment, offering comfort and encouragement along the way. But as much as they were building a strong connection, the reality of their situation began to weigh on her. There were still so many things they didn't know about each other, and their differences were impossible to ignore. He had a life of luxury, a world of privilege that she could never be a part of. She was still struggling to make ends meet, working long hours at a job that barely paid her bills. How could this ever work? How could a woman like her ever belong in his world? She tried not to let these thoughts consume her, but they were always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Whenever they talked about the future, she found herself holding back, afraid to dream too big, afraid that he would eventually realize how out of place she really was. It wasn't until one evening, when they were talking about their futures, that the reality of their situation hit her like a ton of bricks. "I want to be with you," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't care about where you come from, or what you've been through. What matters to me is the connection we have. I've never felt this way about anyone before." She felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to him speak. She wanted so badly to believe him, to let herself fall completely into this relationship. But there was a part of her that was still holding back. She knew that, no matter how much they cared for each other, there would always be a divide between them. She wasn't sure she could ever truly be a part of his world. "I care about you too," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you have to understand. We come from two completely different worlds. I'm just a girl trying to make a living. I don't belong in your world. I don't know if I ever could." He was silent for a moment, and she could hear the faint sound of him exhaling through the phone. "I don't care about that. I don't need you to change, and I don't need you to be anything other than who you are. If you're willing to take this journey with me, then we'll figure out the rest together." Her heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. Could she really do this? Could she let go of her fears and insecurities and take a chance on something so unknown, so uncertain? "I want to be with you," he continued, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "Please don't push me away. I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, she realized something that she had been denying for weeks. She didn't have to belong to his world to be with him. What mattered was the connection they shared, the love that had started to grow between them, no matter how impossible it seemed. With a shaky breath, she typed her response. "Okay, let's do this. Let's figure it out together." She felt a weight lift off her shoulders as soon as she sent the message. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future would hold. But she knew one thing for sure: this was worth fighting for. As she set her phone down, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Maybe this was the start of something new, something beautiful, something that wasn't defined by money or status, but by the connection between two people who were willing to take a chance on love. The walls began to crumble. The days that followed felt like a delicate dance. They had both committed to trying, to navigating the uncertainties of their relationship, despite the stark differences in their worlds. The phone calls, the texts, the late-night messages, all of it had begun to feel more natural than she could have imagined. But the outside world, with its harsh realities and unspoken judgments, still loomed large. She knew she had to face those realities, but a part of her was still uncertain, still afraid that this could all come crashing down at any moment. He was different. The way he cared for her, the way he listened, never once treating her like an outsider in his life, was something she hadn't experienced before. But even now, as she tried to lose herself in their connection, doubts crept in. Could they really make this work? Could she fit into his world of wealth and luxury? Could she ever truly feel comfortable in a life that had always seemed so far out of reach? But then there were the moments, small, fleeting, yet deeply significant, that reminded her of the love that was growing between them. When they spent time together, it didn't matter if they were in his penthouse overlooking the city or in her small, modest apartment. What mattered was that they were together. She had never felt this alive before. One night, as they sat together in a cozy restaurant near her apartment, she found herself laughing harder than she had in a long time. He had taken her out for a casual dinner, something simple but meaningful. She had insisted on paying for their meal, despite his protests. But it wasn't about the money. It was about feeling like they were on equal footing, sharing something without the weight of his wealth hovering over them. "So, what's next?" he asked, his eyes warm with curiosity as they sipped their drinks. "I mean, now that we've decided we're going to do this, what's the next step?" She paused, the question hanging in the air between them. She had been so focused on what they had right now, on the small moments that made her feel seen and loved, that she hadn't thought much about the future. She wasn't sure she was ready to think too far ahead, but his question made her realize that maybe she had been avoiding the inevitable. They needed to talk about what this could become, what they wanted it to be. "I don't know," she said softly, her gaze dropping to the table. I guess we just take it one step at a time, right? It's all so new for me." He nodded, a knowing smile on his lips. "I get that. But I think the important thing is that we're being honest with each other. We're not pretending this is easy, but we're trying, and that's all that matters. We'll figure it out together." His words brought a sense of relief, but also a sense of awe. How was it that someone like him could make it all feel so simple? For her, the thought of their future was complicated, full of insecurities and questions that didn't seem to have easy answers. But with him, even the hardest things seemed possible. Maybe it was because he had never once made her feel like she didn't belong, like she wasn't enough. He had been patient with her, understanding her fears, and offering her the kind of support she had never known. As the evening wore on, she felt a shift within herself, a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She didn't have all the answers, but she didn't need to. She didn't have to figure everything out right now. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. She could be herself, without the weight of the world on her shoulders. Later that night, as they walked back to her apartment, hand in hand, she found herself thinking about the man beside her. He had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. He had opened her eyes to the possibility of a life beyond struggle, a life that could be shared with someone who truly cared. She didn't know where this was going, but she knew she was willing to take the journey. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked, her voice quiet as they strolled down the street. "I mean, where do we go from here?" He squeezed her hand gently, as if reassuring her that they were in this together, no matter what. "I think about it all the time," he admitted, his voice soft. but I'm not in any rush. We've got time, and I'm more focused on making this work with you right now than worrying about the future. I want to be with you, and that's enough for me." Her heart swelled at his words. It was exactly what she needed to hear. In the past, she had always rushed through life, always thinking about what came next, always chasing after something just out of reach. But with him, it was different. He wasn't asking her to keep up with him. He wasn't pushing her to be something she wasn't. He was just there, supporting her, letting her be exactly who she was. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax. Maybe this wasn't about fitting into his world. Maybe this was about creating their own world together. She didn't have to be someone she wasn't. She didn't have to pretend. All she had to do was be with him. When they reached her apartment, she turned to face him, her heart beating a little faster. She wasn't sure what the next step would be, but she was ready to take it. She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she needed to. "I'm glad we're doing this," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I'm glad we're trying." He smiled at her, his eyes filled with warmth and affection. "Me too, and no matter what happens, I'm here. We'll figure it out together." And in that moment, she believed him. She believed that together they could face whatever came next. The world might be full of challenges and uncertainties, but they had each other. And that, she realized, was enough. Finding a new path. The following weeks felt like a blur of both joy and apprehension. They had settled into a rhythm that felt comfortable, but beneath the surface, the world they both inhabited was still very different. She continued to work long hours at her job, struggling to keep up with bills and the reality of her financial situation, while he seemed to glide effortlessly through life with wealth, power, and status. It wasn't that he flaunted his success, he never did, but it was hard not to notice the stark contrast between their lives. Despite that, something about their connection kept them together. She had never felt this kind of support before, this kind of deep understanding. With him, she felt like she could breathe without the constant pressure of trying to prove herself. He didn't expect her to be anything other than who she was, and that was enough. But as their relationship deepened, the weight of their differences began to feel more pronounced, and she found herself questioning how long this could last. It wasn't that she doubted their connection, but more that she doubted herself. She didn't belong in his world. It wasn't just about the money, it was the way he moved through life with confidence, the way people treated him like he was above everyone else. She could feel the disparity between them even in the smallest moments. There were times when they would be out together, and she would see the way others looked at them, how people automatically assumed she didn't belong. How could she, someone who was constantly worried about her next paycheck, possibly fit in with a man who had everything? She pushed those thoughts aside as best as she could, but they lingered. Every time she looked at him, she saw someone who was untouchable, someone whose life seemed so far removed from hers that it was almost surreal. But when they were alone, when they were just two people enjoying each other's company, none of that seemed to matter. In those moments, she was just his, and he was just hers. And that, for the time being, was enough. One night, after a long day at work, she sat on her couch, feeling utterly exhausted. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from him. "I was thinking about you today. I miss you. Can we talk tonight?" She smiled softly at the message, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. They had been talking less lately, and she had missed him too. He was always so busy with his work, and she understood that. But in those quiet moments when they weren't together, she found herself craving his presence. After a few minutes of hesitation, she typed back, "I miss you too. I'd love to talk." The conversation started off easy, the usual light-hearted banter between them, but as they began to catch up, the tone shifted. She could sense that something was on his mind, and when he finally spoke, his voice was more serious than usual. "Is everything okay with you? You've seemed a little distant lately." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't realized how much her inner turmoil had started to show. She had tried to keep her worries hidden, but maybe he could sense them after all. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, but the lie didn't feel right. "Just tired from work." He was silent for a moment before responding. "I know you're working hard, but you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to carry everything by yourself. You've been doing it for so long, but you don't have to. I'm here for you." Her breath caught in her throat. The sincerity in his words hit her harder than she expected. She had never really allowed anyone to help her before. She had always been the one to take care of everything, the one who didn't ask for help because she didn't think she deserved it. But here he was, offering it to her freely, with no strings attached. She swallowed hard, trying to fight back the tears that threatened to fall. She had never let herself be vulnerable with anyone not like this. "I don't know how to accept help," she admitted, her voice small. "I've always done everything on my own. I don't know how to let go of that." He was quiet for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I get that. But you don't have to be alone in this anymore. Let me in. Let me help you carry it. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we can face it together." The walls she had spent so long building around herself began to crumble, piece by piece. She realized then that she didn't have to do it all alone. She didn't have to carry the weight of her struggles by herself. There was someone who wanted to share that burden with her, someone who saw her for who she truly was, not just as a woman struggling to make ends meet, but as a person who deserved love, support, and the chance to be seen. "I'm scared," she confessed, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to be someone who accepts help. I don't know how to be vulnerable." His response was soft but firm. "It's okay to be scared. You don't have to have all the answers. We'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this." For the first time in a long time, she felt the weight lifting. Not all of it, but enough to feel a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced before. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have everything figured out. All she had to do was trust him, trust them, and allow herself to be loved. "I think I'm ready," she said softly, "to let you in." The silence on the other end of the phone was followed by a soft chuckle. "I'm glad. I've been waiting for you to say that." As they continued to talk, she felt a deep sense of peace settle in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to face it. Not alone, but with him by her side. And in that moment, everything felt possible. A leap of faith. The days that followed felt lighter, as though the air around her had shifted just enough to make everything seem a little less heavy. The realization that she didn't have to carry the weight of her life alone had unlocked something inside her, a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She had always been the one to put up walls, to hide behind the facade of self-reliance. But now, with him, it felt different. She was learning to trust, to let someone in, and it was both terrifying and liberating all at once. As they spent more time together, she began to open up about her past, the pieces of her life she had kept hidden from everyone, even herself. She spoke about growing up in a neighborhood where survival was a daily struggle, about the dreams she had pushed aside because they felt too far out of reach. She spoke about the fear of never being good enough, of always being one step behind, and how that had shaped her into the person she had become. He listened, never once interrupting, his presence steady and reassuring. He didn't pity her, didn't try to fix anything. He simply let her share her story, allowing her the space to breathe and process. For the first time, she felt like someone truly understood her, not just the version of herself she presented to the world, but the real, vulnerable parts that she had hidden away for so long. But as they grew closer, the inevitable question loomed in the back of her mind. Could this really work? Could they build a life together despite the vast differences between their worlds? She knew the risks, how easy it would be for her to lose herself in his world, to feel like she didn't belong. She had always been the outsider, the one who didn't fit in. Could she truly find a place for herself in a life so different from her own? One afternoon, as they sat on the rooftop of his penthouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, the question slipped out before she could stop it. "Do you ever worry about us? About what happens if this doesn't work?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to her, his gaze steady, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The city stretched out before them, a sprawling maze of lights and buildings. But in that moment, it was just the two of them, suspended in a world that felt entirely their own. "I've thought about it," he said after a pause, his voice calm but serious. "But the truth is, I'm not afraid. Not anymore. I've spent so much of my life building a world of success, of control. But that world felt empty. It's only been with you that I've felt something real, something that matters. So if it doesn't work, then I'll know I've done everything I could. But I don't want to live with the regret of not trying." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had always been the cautious one, the one who held back, afraid of taking risks. But hearing him speak so honestly, so vulnerably, made her realize that sometimes the greatest risk is not taking one at all. She had spent so much of her life protecting herself from disappointment, but maybe it was time to stop being afraid of it. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Scared of what could happen if we get too close. Scared of what happens if I get hurt. But I think I'm more afraid of losing the chance to be with you, of letting fear dictate my choices." He reached out, taking her hand in his fingers warm and reassuring. "Fear is natural," he said softly, "but you don't have to face it alone. I'm here with you, every step of the way. And I'll be here, even when things get tough. We don't have to have it all figured out right now. We just have to trust that whatever happens, we'll face it together." Her heart swelled at his words, a mixture of relief and gratitude washing over her. She had always feared that love would be something complicated, something fraught with uncertainty. But here he was, offering her something simple: honesty, loyalty, and the promise of being there, no matter what. She squeezed his hand gently, the weight of her fears lifting just a little. "I want to trust you," she said, her voice steady now. "I want to believe that we can make this work." "And we will," he said, his smile soft but certain. "One step at a time." That night, as they lay side by side, the city lights flickering softly in the distance, she realized that love wasn't about having all the answers or knowing what the future held. It was about trust, the trust that, even in the face of uncertainty, they would choose each other, time and time again. She didn't need to have everything figured out. She just needed to be present, to embrace the moments that mattered. The next few weeks were filled with small victories, moments that built their connection even stronger. They spent more time together, not just in the lavish world he inhabited, but in the quieter, more intimate spaces of her life. He visited her apartment more often, bringing takeout and watching movies late into the night. He wanted to understand her world, just as she wanted to understand his. They were learning, growing, and evolving together. But the truth remained. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would always be challenges, things that tested them, that questioned their commitment. The world they came from was vastly different, and no amount of love could erase that. Yet, despite the obstacles, she found herself more willing than ever to take that leap of faith with him. The future was unknown, and that was okay. All they had was the present, each moment spent together, each step forward in their journey. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that as long as they were together, they could handle anything life threw their way. A leap into the unknown. The days stretched out before them, each one carrying a promise of something new. Their relationship, which had begun with hesitation and fear, had gradually evolved into something stronger, more certain. She found herself more present in their moments together, no longer weighed down by the anxiety that had once defined her. She was learning to trust, to let go of the past and embrace the future, even if it was filled with uncertainties. He had become her rock, the one person who seemed to understand her in ways no one else could. He had shown her a side of life she had never imagined, but it wasn't just the luxury or the prestige that had captured her heart. It was his kindness, his unwavering support, and the way he made her feel like she was enough just as she was. In a world that had often made her feel invisible, he truly saw her, and that made all the difference. But despite the growing closeness between them, there was always that underlying question that seemed to hang over her like a dark cloud. Could they really make this work? The divide between their worlds was still there, no matter how much they tried to ignore it. She was still the girl from a small apartment, working a job that barely paid her bills, while he was a man who seemed to glide through life with effortless success. She had learned to stop comparing herself to him, but she couldn't escape the nagging feeling that, at some point, their differences would catch up to them. That evening, as they sat together in his sleek, modern living room, sipping wine and enjoying the comfort of each other's company, she couldn't push the thought away any longer. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice quiet but determined. She had thought about this for days, trying to figure out the right moment, but there was never going to be a perfect time. "Of course," he replied, his tone soft and encouraging. He had noticed the change in her recently, the way she had begun to open up more, the way she was beginning to let go of her fears. He knew this conversation was coming. He had felt it in the air between them. "I've been thinking," she continued, pausing for a moment to collect her thoughts. "We come from two completely different worlds, and I know we've been taking this one step at a time, but how do you see this? How do you see us? Can this really work, or are we just living in the moment?" He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before setting his wine glass down and leaning forward, his eyes steady on hers. "I see us," he began, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "I see two people who are choosing to be together, despite the challenges. Yes, we come from different worlds, and yes, there are things that will be difficult, but I don't believe that's what defines us. What defines us is what we've built so far, the trust, the connection, the way we make each other better. And I think that's worth fighting for." She felt a rush of relief wash over her, the tension she hadn't even realized she was holding in her shoulders starting to ease. "But do you think it's enough? Can love really bridge the gap between our lives? I want to believe it, but sometimes I wonder if I'm just dreaming." He reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his touch warm and grounding. "I don't think it's about making our worlds the same. It's about finding a way to be together in a way that works for both of us. I'm not asking you to change who you are or where you come from. I'm asking you to trust that what we have is real, and that we can navigate whatever comes next together." His words resonated deep within her. She had been so focused on the differences between them that she had forgotten to see what they shared. They didn't need to have the same life or the same background to make this work. What mattered was that they cared for each other, that they were willing to put in the effort, and that they were committed to making it through the hard times together. "I think I've been afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that I wouldn't be enough for you, that I'd never fit into your world. But maybe what you're saying is right. Maybe it's not about fitting in. It's about making a space for us in each other's lives." He smiled, a small but knowing smile. "Exactly. And I'm more than happy to make that space for you. You've already made a space for me in your life, and that's all I need." She felt her heart swell at his words, a rush of emotion overwhelming her. For so long she had kept herself guarded, afraid of being hurt, afraid of losing herself in someone else's life. But with him, she was learning that love wasn't about losing yourself. It was about growing together, about finding strength in each other's presence. "Then let's do this," she said, her voice firm and full of resolve. "Let's make it work, together." As he squeezed her hand, she could feel the weight of the decision settle into place. This wasn't going to be easy. There would be obstacles, challenges they couldn't predict, and moments where they would have to lean on each other. But for the first time, she felt truly ready to face those challenges, not as two people from different worlds, but as two people who had found something real. He smiled, a soft, sincere smile that filled her with warmth. "We will. One step at a time." And as they sat there together, the city lights casting a gentle glow through the window, she knew that this was just the beginning. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, she felt a deep sense of peace. They didn't have to have everything figured out. They just had to trust in each other and in the love they had built. And with that trust, there was nothing they couldn't face together. Embracing the uncertainty. As the days passed, their lives began to merge in ways neither of them could have predicted. What had once seemed like an impossible relationship, two people from completely different worlds, struggling to find common ground, was beginning to feel like a seamless blend of trust, patience, and understanding. She had stepped out of the shadows of her own doubts, and he had let her into his world in ways that felt both humbling and empowering. Together, they were creating something new, something that didn't rely on the things that divided them, but on the shared space they had carved out in each other's lives. But the reality of their differences was never far from her mind. She had been living with the nagging worry that, no matter how much they tried to overcome the gap between their worlds, it would always catch up to them. And while she had pushed those fears aside for the moment, they still lingered in the background, waiting for a moment of weakness when she would let them back in. It wasn't until one afternoon, a few weeks after their heart-to-heart conversation on the rooftop, that the truth of their differences hit her in a way that she couldn't ignore. He had invited her to a charity gala he was hosting, something extravagant that would bring together the world of business, high society, and luxury, his world, not hers. At first, she had been hesitant, unsure if she was ready to step into a world where she didn't quite fit. But he had assured her it would be fine, that she would be with him the whole time, and that he wanted her there. So, with a deep breath and a small flicker of nervousness, she agreed. The night of the gala, she stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the elegant dress he had suggested she wear. She had never felt more out of place. The dress was beautiful, elegant, and chic, but she couldn't help but feel like it was a costume, something that didn't belong to her. She had always felt more comfortable in jeans and a t-shirt, far removed from the world of gowns and tuxedos. Tonight, everything felt different. When she arrived at the venue with him, the vast ballroom glittered with chandeliers, and the air was filled with the hum of voices mingling in hushed tones. She could feel her heart race, the noise of her own thoughts louder than anything else. She had never seen anything like this. The polished faces, the designers' names she didn't recognize, the way everyone moved with such ease in a world that seemed so foreign to her. And yet, he was by her side the entire time, guiding her through the crowd with a quiet strength. Every now and then, she would catch him glancing at her, his eyes soft with reassurance. Despite the extravagance of the event, he never made her feel out of place. In fact, he seemed to take a special pride in introducing her to the people there, the ones who had no idea who she was or where she came from. To them, she was just another guest, no labels, no assumptions. She was simply her. But even with his constant support, there was still an undercurrent of discomfort within her. She had never been part of this world, never belonged to this circle. She was just a small-town girl, trying to figure out how to navigate a life she never imagined. Every glance from a stranger seemed to remind her of that, how she didn't quite belong in a room like this. She caught herself pulling away from the crowd, seeking a quieter corner of the room. She needed a moment to breathe, to collect herself. A few minutes later, he found her, standing by a large window that overlooked the city. He didn't say anything at first, simply stood beside her, letting the silence stretch between them. The view was breathtaking, the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, but it didn't help quiet the turmoil inside her. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong with him. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice laced with concern. She turned to face him, her eyes a little too bright. I don't know, this is all so much. I feel like I'm pretending, like I'm not really part of this. He took a step closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. You're not pretending. You don't have to be part of this world to be with me. You belong with me because of who you are, not because of what you wear or where you're from. She shook her head, her voice shaking. But this world is so far from mine. I don't even know how to talk to these people. I feel like an outsider, like I'm not supposed to be here. He stepped closer still, his fingers brushing against hers. I brought you here because I want you with me, not because I think you need to impress anyone. You don't need to be anything other than yourself, and if they can't see that, then they're not worth your time. Her heart swelled at his words, but the doubt still lingered. I don't know if I can keep doing this. Keep pretending like it's easy, like I'm okay with everything. He looked at her, his expression soft but unyielding. You don't have to pretend. Just be honest with me. If it's too much, we'll leave. If it's too overwhelming, we'll go. But know this, you don't need to change. You're enough as you are. The weight in her chest lightened, and for the first time that night, she let herself breathe. She didn't have to pretend. She didn't have to be someone else. The world they lived in might have been different, but it was their world. And with him by her side, maybe she could find her place in it after all. I think I'm ready to go, she said softly, finally letting go of the tension that had held her captive. He smiled, taking her hand in his, and without another word, they left the event together, just the two of them, facing the uncertainty, but knowing that they had each other. And that, she realized, was enough. Unwritten futures. The following days after the gala felt like a breath of fresh air. She had expected the heaviness of the night to linger, but instead it was as if the world had shifted just a little. She no longer felt like an imposter. The night at the gala had been overwhelming, yes, but it had also revealed something important to her. It wasn't the grand venues or the wealth that defined their relationship. It was the moments when she was just herself, when they were together in quiet spaces, away from the flashing lights and expectations. That was where she truly felt at home. She had never imagined herself in a world like this. The glittering high society events, the power lunches, the social circles filled with celebrities and entrepreneurs. But here she was, and she was learning something important. It wasn't about belonging to that world. It was about finding the space to be who she was, to grow without pretending, to accept that she was enough. That realization had been a gift she had carried with her from that night onward. But still, the world they lived in loomed large. The more time they spent together, the more their differences came into sharper focus. She was still very much in the process of figuring out how she fit into his life, into his world of boardrooms and champagne toasts. Yet, every time she felt like she was drowning in the disparity between their lives, he was there to remind her that it wasn't about fitting in. It was about choosing each other every day, no matter what. She had started to allow herself to feel hopeful, something she hadn't done in a long time. The fear that had once held her back, the fear that told her she wasn't worthy of love like this, was beginning to fade. In its place, there was a quiet strength growing inside her, the kind that came from knowing she wasn't alone. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One particular evening, as they sat in his penthouse, sipping wine and talking about their day, something shifted. The conversation had started casually, but as the night wore on, she could feel the change in the air. "How do you see us?" he asked suddenly, his voice gentle but serious. The question hung in the air between them like a weight. "Do you think we're building something lasting?" She blinked, caught off guard by the depth of his question. For weeks they had navigated their relationship one day at a time, letting the connection grow naturally. But now, the thought of the future was becoming more real, more immediate. "I want to believe it's lasting," she said carefully, her voice steady. "I want to believe that we can build something that works between us. But I have to admit, I've been scared to think too far ahead. There's still so much uncertainty, so many things I don't know about this world." He nodded, his eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I know," he said softly, "and I don't want to rush you into anything. I need to know that we're both on the same page, that we're both willing to keep moving forward together." She took a deep breath, her mind racing. She wanted to believe in the future they could build, but her own doubts and insecurities crept in, as they always did. Was it enough that they loved each other? Was it enough to keep pushing forward when there were so many obstacles standing between them? The world they came from was different, and no matter how much they tried to bridge that gap, it would always be there. "I've never really been good at the whole future thing," she said quietly, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. "I've always kept my focus on the present, on surviving. But with you, I feel like maybe I can start thinking about the future. Maybe I can start thinking about what's possible." His gaze softened, and he leaned forward, his voice low and reassuring. "You don't have to have everything figured out right now. We don't have to have all the answers. But I need to know that you're willing to try, that you're willing to take a leap of faith with me, even when things are uncertain." For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the weight of his words sinking in. She knew what he was asking, and she also knew that it wasn't just a question about the relationship. It was a question about her, about whether or not she was ready to let go of her own fears, her doubts, and take a chance on something bigger than she had ever imagined. Finally, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "I'm ready to take that leap with you. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to be with you. I want to see where this takes us." His face broke into a smile, and for the first time that evening, the tension between them seemed to melt away. "That's all I needed to hear." She smiled back, her heart lifting in her chest. The uncertainty was still there, hovering just beneath the surface, but now it felt manageable. Now they were facing it together, and that made all the difference. As they continued to talk late into the night, she realized something important. The future would never be certain. There would always be things that they couldn't predict, obstacles they couldn't control. But what mattered most was the choice they were making together. Every day, they were choosing each other. Every day, they were building something real, something worth fighting for. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. In the end, she realized that life wasn't about having all the answers or finding the perfect path. It was about the willingness to walk the path, no matter where it led. And with him by her side, she felt ready to walk it, step by uncertain step. Facing the unknown. Together. The weeks that followed felt like an evolution. They had both committed to moving forward, not knowing exactly what the future held, but trusting in each other enough to take the next step. The uncertainty that had once felt suffocating now felt like something they could handle, as long as they were together. She was learning to embrace the moments of doubt, not letting them define her. And more importantly, she was learning to trust him in a way she had never trusted anyone before. The future was still unwritten, but it no longer seemed as terrifying as it once had. They spent more time together, finding joy in the small things. It wasn't always about extravagant nights out or high society events. Sometimes it was just sitting on his balcony, enjoying a quiet evening under the stars, talking about everything and nothing at the same time. They cooked dinner together, sharing a laugh over burned garlic bread or spilled wine. These were the moments that mattered most to her, the ones where they were just two people, connecting in a way that was real and unguarded. But as much as she was learning to settle into this new rhythm, the outside world still had a way of reminding her of their differences. One morning, as they sat together at breakfast, she read a news article about a business venture he was involved in, one that had garnered attention in the media. The article painted him as a visionary, a man who had everything at his fingertips. The words seemed to hang in the air, a reminder of the divide between their lives, a divide she couldn't ignore. He saw the look on her face as she stared at her phone, and his voice broke the silence. I know you're probably reading about the project in the news. It's been a whirlwind lately, and I hate that it keeps pulling me away from you." She put the phone down and met his gaze. She hadn't meant to let the tension show, but it had. "It's just, sometimes it feels like the world you're in is so far from mine. The way people look at you, the way they treat you. It's hard to remember that we're just two people when there's all this noise around us." He sighed, setting his coffee cup down and reaching across the table to take her hand. "I get it, I really do. It's a lot to take in, especially when I'm pulled in so many directions. But you have to know this. The way the world sees me doesn't change who I am, or how I feel about you. I'm still the same person who wants to spend time with you, who wants to build something real with you. None of that changes because of headlines or boardroom meetings." Her heart warmed at his words, but doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. "I know, but it's hard. I see you, and I see everything that comes with it. People in your world, they expect you to fit a certain mold, to be a part of something bigger than just us. And I wonder sometimes if that's what you want too." He shook his head, his expression serious. "I've never wanted anyone or anything more than I want you. It's not about fitting into some mold, it's about what we're building together. I'm not saying it's easy or that it will always be simple, but it's worth it. You are worth it." She could feel the sincerity in his words, the way his gaze softened when he looked at her. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe him. She had spent so much time holding back, afraid of what would happen if she let herself truly trust. But now she realized that the only way forward was to let go of her fears. "I want this too," she said quietly, her voice firm with resolve. "I want to be with you, no matter what. But I need to learn to let go of the things that hold me back, to stop letting the world tell me how this should look." He squeezed her hand, a small but powerful gesture of reassurance. "And I'll be here to remind you of that. We don't need to follow anyone else's blueprint. We'll make our own path." It was simple, but it was enough. She didn't need to have everything figured out right now. All she needed was to trust that they were in this together, and that with him by her side, she could face whatever came next. A few days later, they took a trip to a small town by the coast, far away from the distractions of the city and his high-profile life. It was just the two of them, walking along the shore, the salty air ruffling their hair as they talked about their hopes, their fears, and the dreams they hadn't dared to speak aloud until now. There was something about the peace of the place that allowed them to just be, without the weight of expectations or the pressures of their respective worlds. As they sat on the sand, watching the sun set over the horizon, he turned to her, his expression serious, but full of warmth. "I know we still have a long way to go," he said softly, "but I want you to know, no matter what happens, I'll always choose you. I'll choose us." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of peace settle in her chest. The future was still uncertain, but they were creating something strong and real, something that wasn't dependent on external circumstances. It was something they could hold on to, even when the world around them seemed out of control. "I'll choose us too," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to take this journey with you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the last of the sun dipped below the horizon. The world was still uncertain, and there were challenges ahead, but in that moment, they were exactly where they needed to be, together. And that was enough. The road ahead wasn't clear, but as long as they walked it side by side, she felt ready for whatever came next. The unknown no longer seemed so daunting. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. The quiet strength of us. The days after their trip to the coast brought a new sense of calm. They had both returned to their daily lives with a renewed perspective. The peacefulness of the beach, the simplicity of those quiet moments spent together, had grounded them in a way that nothing else had. She had learned to release the tight grip of her fears and doubts, and in doing so, she had begun to embrace the life she was building with him. They no longer lived in the shadow of what might be or what could go wrong. They were creating something that was uniquely theirs, and that gave her more strength than she had ever imagined. But reality, as it often does, crept in. The world they lived in, full of ambition and responsibility, wasn't going to wait for them to catch their breath. Life continued, and the challenges that came with their respective worlds were always just around the corner. While she had started to feel more comfortable in his presence, there were still days when she felt like she was swimming in uncharted waters. He moved through life with a sense of ease, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that she still had so much to learn. One afternoon, she sat in her apartment, going through some paperwork for her job, when her phone buzzed. It was a message from him. "I have an event tonight, and I know it's last minute, but I'd love for you to come with me. It's an important one for the company, but I'd really like you there. It's in an hour, if you're free." She stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Another event, another night where she would have to navigate a world that didn't quite feel like hers. The insecurities that she thought she had left behind crept back, bringing with them all the worries she had tried to push aside. She had never been comfortable in those spaces, where everyone seemed to know each other, where the conversation flowed seamlessly while she struggled to keep up. Still, she found herself typing a response before she could second-guess herself. "I'll be there. Just give me a few minutes." She didn't know why she said yes, but she did. Maybe it was the way he had asked, or maybe it was the desire to keep proving to herself that she was capable of stepping into his world. She quickly changed into the dress she had worn for the gala, the one that had felt foreign to her, but had somehow come to feel like part of her life now. She took a deep breath before leaving, the butterflies in her stomach almost too much to ignore. When she arrived at the event, she was immediately hit by the buzz of energy in the room, the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, the swirl of conversations happening all around her. It felt like stepping into a different world, one that was far removed from her own. She spotted him across the room, talking with a group of people. As always, he looked confident, at ease, like he belonged. She hesitated for a moment before making her way over to him. He caught sight of her before she could reach him, and his face lit up with a smile that made her feel both seen and cherished. He excused himself from the group and walked toward her. "You made it," he said, his voice warm. "I'm glad you're here." "I almost didn't come," she admitted, feeling the nerves bubbling up again. "It just feels so different from what I'm used to." He took her hand gently and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "I understand, but you're not alone. I'm right here with you." She smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle into her chest. It wasn't about fitting in or pretending to be something she wasn't. It was about being with him, sharing this moment, and learning to navigate these spaces together. They spent the evening together, with him introducing her to colleagues and friends, and she found herself more comfortable than she had expected. With him by her side, the room felt less intimidating. The conversation flowed easier, and she found herself laughing, enjoying the company of people she would have once considered out of her league. It wasn't about the event, the people, or the social status. It was about the connection they shared, the way they had found something real and lasting between them that allowed her to step outside her comfort zone and still feel grounded. Later that night, as they left the event, he turned to her, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You were amazing tonight. I knew you'd do great." She shook her head, feeling a little embarrassed. "I don't know about that, but thank you. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. With you there, I felt like I could actually be myself." He laughed softly, the sound soothing. "That's the only thing I want from you, your real self. You don't have to fit into anyone else's world. You've already fit perfectly into mine." His words settled into her heart, reaffirming everything she had been learning in the months they had been together. It wasn't about the events, the people, or the expectations. It was about the trust they had built, the space they had created for each other in the midst of everything that was uncertain. As they walked down the quiet street together, the world around them dimming in the late evening light, she realized that the future was still unwritten, but it no longer felt so daunting. There would always be challenges, moments where they would both have to stretch and grow. But with him by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. They didn't have to have everything figured out. They just had to take each step together, trusting that no matter how different their worlds might be, they could create something that was all their own. And for the first time in a long while, she felt completely at peace with that. Strength in vulnerability. The days after the event felt different in a subtle way. She had faced her insecurities head-on, and in doing so had come out stronger. She no longer felt like she was pretending to fit into his world. She was starting to realize that it wasn't about adapting to someone else's expectations, but about embracing who she truly was and allowing him to do the same. The confidence she had once lacked was beginning to grow in quiet moments when she was reminded of the trust they had built and the bond they shared. The real test, however, came when they found themselves in a situation that neither of them could have predicted. A week after the event, he had been out of town for a business trip, and she had spent the days focused on work and quietly reflecting on the progress they had made. It was late in the afternoon when she received an unexpected call from his assistant. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to let you know that there's been a sudden change in his schedule. He's stuck in a meeting that's running late, and there's a flight he needs to catch for a critical deal," the assistant explained. "We've just learned that there's been a scheduling issue with the flight, and he might not make it back until tomorrow afternoon." She paused, processing the information. "So, he won't be home tonight?" "Not tonight, no. I'm sorry about the change. I'm sure he'll be in touch when he can." She hung up, a wave of disappointment washing over her. She had been looking forward to their evening together. It was one of the rare occasions when they both had free time, and now that had been taken away by something outside of their control. Her mind immediately went to the negative space, the fear of him being caught up in his work, the frustration of constantly being in the background of his busy life. She had always told herself that she understood his commitments, but there was something about the suddenness of this shift that left her feeling vulnerable. Later that evening, she found herself pacing around her apartment, caught in a mix of frustration and hurt. She knew that his work was important, that it was a huge part of who he was, but at the same time, it felt like she was losing him to a world that had no room for her. She had grown used to him being present, to the way he made her feel seen and heard. But tonight, that was slipping away. Just as she was about to lose herself in her thoughts, her phone buzzed. It was a message from him. "Hey, I'm sorry about the change in plans. The meeting is dragging on, and I feel terrible about missing our night. I'll call you when I get back. I know this is frustrating, but I'm thinking about you." She stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, trying to balance the feelings of disappointment with the understanding she had promised herself. "I get it. I know your work is important, but it's just hard. It's hard when I feel like I'm always waiting for you, like you're always out of reach." The reply came quickly, his words more tender than she expected. "I never want you to feel like that. I don't want you to feel like you're always waiting. You matter to me more than I can put into words. I can't be there tonight, but I'll make sure I'm there for you when I get back." She sat down on the couch, the weight of his words sinking in. There it was again, his vulnerability, the openness that had drawn her in so many months ago. Despite his busy schedule, despite the world he inhabited, he was trying to meet her halfway. She realized that the challenges they faced weren't just about external pressures or differences in their lives. They were about their ability to navigate those pressures together, to communicate through the frustrations, and to keep choosing each other in the face of it all. Her phone buzzed again, another message from him. "I know this isn't easy, but I want you to know I'm here. I don't always get it right, and I know I mess up, but I'm willing to keep trying if you are." The vulnerability in his words made her heart swell, a mixture of love and understanding flooding her chest. She had always been afraid of being vulnerable, of showing the parts of herself that were uncertain, that were afraid of getting hurt. But in that moment, she realized that his vulnerability was a gift, a way for them to connect on a deeper level. "I'm willing to try too," she replied. "I don't have all the answers either, but I know I don't want to lose what we have." As she pressed send, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The space between them, the frustrations, the doubts, all of it was part of their journey. And with each passing day, they were learning how to face those challenges together, not as two separate people, but as a team. Later that night, she sat in bed with a book, trying to distract herself from the quiet absence of his presence. She felt the pang of longing, but there was also a sense of peace in knowing that, no matter what, they were choosing to be vulnerable with each other. They were learning how to communicate in ways that didn't shy away from the tough conversations, the difficult moments. The phone rang just as she was about to close her eyes. It was him. "I'm sorry again," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I wanted to make tonight special, and I feel like I've let you down." She smiled, the warmth of his voice wrapping around her like a comfort. "You haven't let me down. We're just figuring it out, together." There was a pause on the other end before he spoke again, his voice softer now. "You're right. I'm really lucky to have you." And as they talked, she realized that their relationship wasn't perfect. It wasn't always smooth sailing. But in the moments when they let their guards down, when they faced the rawness of their feelings and the reality of their lives, she knew they were building something strong, a connection that would carry them through whatever came next. And that, she understood now, was where the real strength lay. In vulnerability. In choosing each other, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. Trusting the journey. The days after their late-night conversation brought an undeniable shift. Something had changed, but it was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. She had always been cautious with her heart, afraid to trust it fully. But now, with him, there was a feeling that settled deep within her, a feeling that told her they were on the right path. No longer were they tiptoeing around each other's fears and insecurities. They were learning how to face them, to let the walls come down, and to meet each other in the middle. The phone call that night had been a turning point. It wasn't just an apology or an attempt to make things right. It was an understanding, an unspoken promise that they would continue to show up for each other, even when things weren't easy. She had always thought that love was supposed to be effortless, but the reality was far more beautiful and complicated than that. It was about navigating the messiness of life together, side by side, with patience, empathy, and, most importantly, trust. The weekend arrived, and for the first time in weeks, they both had free time. No work trips, no important meetings, just two people who wanted to spend time together. She had suggested a quiet evening, just the two of them, away from the glitz and glamour of his world. She wanted something simple, something that felt real, and he had agreed without hesitation. They decided to spend the evening at a nearby cabin in the woods, a place that had been a favorite getaway for him. It was the perfect escape, a place where no one knew who they were or what they did for a living. It was just nature, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, and the quiet hum of the world around them. They arrived in the late afternoon, and the air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and earth. There was a peacefulness about the place that made her feel like they were the only two people on Earth. As they settled in, they sat on the porch overlooking a vast, calm lake. The sunlight was beginning to fade, casting golden rays over the water. She leaned back in her chair, soaking in the moment. There were no expectations, no pressures, just the two of them, existing in a space where they could simply be. "This place," she said, her voice soft. "It feels like everything slows down here." He glanced over at her, a small smile on his face. "That's the point. It's a reminder that we don't need to always be moving forward. Sometimes it's okay to just pause and be in the moment." She looked at him, her heart swelling with a warmth she had never felt before. He was right. It wasn't about always striving for the next thing or rushing to the finish line. It was about finding peace in the now, in the present. She had spent so much of her life focused on what came next, on what she needed to do to succeed, that she had forgotten to simply exist. "I think I've spent too much of my life chasing things," she admitted, her gaze still on the lake. "Always thinking that if I just get to the next step, Everything will make sense. But I'm starting to realize that maybe I'm missing the point." He turned toward her, his eyes serious but kind. "The point isn't about what you have or don't have. It's about being able to enjoy what you do have in the moment. You've spent so much time trying to make sense of things, trying to fit yourself into a mold that never truly fit. But you don't have to anymore. You're allowed to just be." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove something, to show the world that she was capable, that she was enough. But in that moment, sitting next to him in the quiet of the woods, she realized that she had always been enough. She didn't need anyone else's approval. She just needed to be true to herself. The evening unfolded in a way that felt almost dreamlike. They cooked dinner together, laughing over silly mistakes in the kitchen. They shared stories about their childhoods, about the things that had shaped them, the people who had influenced them. It was the kind of conversation that felt effortless, filled with vulnerability and honesty. They weren't just partners in a relationship anymore, they were friends, sharing their lives with each other in a way that felt completely natural. After dinner, they went for a walk along the lake, the night sky unfolding above them in a blanket of stars. The air was cool but not uncomfortable, and she felt an overwhelming sense of calm as they walked side by side, not speaking much but simply being together. Eventually, they sat down on a bench by the water, their legs brushing lightly against each other. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the quiet sound of the water lapping against the shore, adding to the peace she felt. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked after a long silence. It wasn't something they had talked about much, but she found herself wondering what it would look like for them in the years to come. "I do," he replied, his voice soft. "But I think the future is something we build together, day by day. We don't need to have all the answers right now. We just need to keep showing up for each other. That's what matters most." She closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. The future didn't have to be planned out, didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be something they chose to face together. And for the first time, she felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next, ready to trust that they could handle it together. There was no blueprint for their relationship, no set path they had to follow. But with him by her side, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it with strength, love, and trust. The night stretched on, but she wasn't worried about time anymore. She was content in the moment, in the knowledge that they were on this journey together. And that, in itself, was enough. One of the key lessons from the story is the power of vulnerability and trust in relationships. It emphasizes that true connection isn't about perfection or fitting into a mold, but about being authentic, embracing each other's flaws, and showing up for each other, especially when life doesn't go as planned. In personal relationships, whether romantic, familial, or even friendships, it's easy to get caught up in the expectations and pressures of the world around us, forgetting that what truly matters is the bond we create through genuine care, open communication, and mutual support. Life often pulls us in different directions, but finding peace comes from understanding that it's not about chasing after an ideal, but embracing the moment and trusting in the journey together. This is a reminder that we don't need to have everything figured out or follow a prescribed path to feel fulfilled. Rather, by trusting ourselves and those we choose to share our lives with, we can face uncertainty with resilience and hope, knowing that the act of showing up day by day is enough. As the story unfolded, she began to realize that sometimes life has a way of surprising us in the most unexpected ways. What began as a simple, desperate message to her mom had become the start of a journey she could never have imagined. The man who had received her message was not just a wealthy CEO. He was someone who saw beyond the surface, someone who understood what it felt like to be broken, to feel lost. And in that instant, their worlds collided in a way neither of them had ever expected. The weeks that followed were filled with moments of learning, of growing together, and of discovering the power of vulnerability. The millionaire wasn't just offering her a glimpse into his world of wealth and luxury, he was offering her something far more precious, a chance to heal, to trust again, and to find a love that didn't care about what the world thought. It wasn't easy, of course. They both had their doubts, their fears, but together, they faced them. Step by step, hand in hand, they created a bond that defied expectations. Because love, when it's real, doesn't come with conditions. It comes with understanding, patience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. So, to everyone watching, remember, no matter how broken or lost you feel, sometimes the universe has a way of leading you exactly where you need to be. Trust the journey. Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to Stories TH, and share where you're from in the comments below. Let's continue this amazing journey together. Take care.